5.3 talks about trig functions of any angle, okay? It's the same premise, guys, that we have talked about with opposite over hypotenuse, that sort of a thing. But instead of being given a triangle where you're finding the sides, they're going to talk about something that's on the coordinate plane itself, on the XY chart. Okay, we're going to have a theta, we're going to have an opposite side, we're going to have a adjacent, all that stuff, but we're going to be using it, that's okay. It's okay. We're going to be using it like we're on an XY or coordinate plane. So when I look at this, okay, when I look at this, do you guys see the right triangle that is formed? Yes? If this is my theta, right, this is my theta, what is my y value here? If this is my theta, what's y? Opposite hypotenuse what? This is the opposite side, right? What is x? My adjacent side. And what is r? Your hypotenuse, all right? We're still talking about right triangle trig stuff. Just instead of using the words opposite over hypotenuse, adjacent over hypotenuse, we're going to be using the letters y, x, and r. If I give you an ordered pair and I say 4, -3, what is the y value? -3. What is the x value? 4. How would you find r if you knew two of the legs were trying to find the hypotenuse? You would say 4 squared plus -3 squared equals r squared, right? So we're doing the exact same thing that we were just doing a little bit ago when you were given a triangle, but this is just a little more grown up, we'll say, or advanced, because we're talking about they're going to give us something on the unit circle, on a coordinate plane, and we have to find the trig functions. But this is totally doable. 100%. Whoops, wrong button. These are the things you guys need to remember. We're going to go over this a gajillion times. A gajillion times. But we're going to be talking, instead of opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse, we're going to use the letters y, x, and r. Okay, so r is always your hypotenuse. Write this down. R, always, if I could spell always, let's try that again. Always the longest side, and it's always positive. And you'll see why that's a big thing here in a second. Always positive and always the longest side. So when you're given something, you'll see this in a second, you need to identify the x, the y, and the r first, and then we can find all of the trig functions. Instead of you saying sine is opposite over hypotenuse, we're going to say that sine is the y value over the r value. Cosine is the x value over the r value. Tangent is y over x. It's the same as opposite over hypotenuse, adjacent over hypotenuse, and opposite over adjacent. So these are really important for you guys to memorize, for you to know. If I told you that I wanted the reciprocal, how would I find the reciprocal of sine? What would I do with y and r? It's the cosecant, and you would do what? Flip it. If I asked for the secant, what would it be? R over x. And then what would the cotangent be? X over y. Perfect. Good, good, good. Okay, so you guys are going to be awesome at this. This is exactly what we just said, right? If I'm trying to find r, I'm going to take my x value, square it, my y value, square it, add them together, take the square root. It's the Pythagorean theorem. It's the exact same thing that we have been doing. We're just labeling it differently. Okay, now, this is something that's really, 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 really important. Really important. They're going to tell you where an angle lies. They're going to say this angle lies in quadrant whatever. Right? Quadrant whatever. Let's talk about the quadrants. First of all, do you guys agree with me that this is quadrant 1? This is 2. This is 3. And this is 4. Correct? Okay, let's talk about the signs. I mean the positive, negative in all the quadrants. So in quadrant 1, what are the values of x and y? Both positive, right? Plus, plus. In quadrant 2, what is x? Negative, because we go left. And then y is what? Positive. In quadrant 3, what are they both? Negative, negative. And in quadrant 4, what are they? Positive, negative. Good. Whoops. Very good. All right, so now we're going to write a couple more things. You're going to think about the first quadrant as all positive. That's what the A stands for, all. All trig functions, sine, cosine, tangent, and their reciprocals are positive if the angle lies in the first quadrant. In the second quadrant, what do you think the only two trig functions are that are positive? Sine and what? Cosecant, good, are positive. What about in the third quadrant? Tangent and what? Good, cotangent. And then what about cosine and secant? Okay, that's going to be really important for you guys to memorize. There's a mnemonic device. There's two of them. All right, a mnemonic device. If I said, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, PEMDAS, right? That's a mnemonic device. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So the mnemonic device, remember this, is all students take calculus. First quadrant, A, all 6 trig functions are positive. In the second quadrant, sine and cosecant are positive, everything else is negative. In tangent and cotangent in the third, positive, everything else negative. And then in the fourth quadrant, cosine and secant are positive, everything else is negative. So when will we use this information? Okay, when will we use this information? Here's how we use it. You guys will be given a question or two on your quiz, and it's just this basic. And it says determine which quadrant. And they're going to tell you these two things. And you guys look at me like, what? Okay, so this is how we're going to do it. First thing we're going to do is draw our coordinate. And I'm going to say all students take calculus, right? Wink, wink. So look at you look at these two statements independently. The first thing I'm going to look at right here, what does this say? Sine of theta is what? Less than 0. What does it mean if something is less than 0? It's negative, okay? So this means that sine and cosecant are negative. So go over to our all students take calculus. I want to cross off the places that don't count, that don't work. So in the first quadrant, is sine and cosecant negative? No, so it can't be in that quadrant. In the second quadrant, is sine and cosecant negative? In the second quadrant, is sine and cosecant positive or negative? Positive. It's positive, so it can't be here. All right, the first parameter, we'll say, tells you to cross off two things. Now the second piece, we look at this and it says tangent is what? Greater than 0. So we know that this angle lies where tangent and cotangent are positive. Well, what's left over? Where are tangent and cotangent positive? In the third quadrant. So you would tell me the answer to this would be quadrant 3. Where does the angle lie? The first statement will help you cross off two things. The second statement will narrow it down to the last thing. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm a little confused.
Mm-hmm. So to look at both things independently. We have all students take calculus. The first statement right here helps you eliminate 2 of the 4 quadrants because we're trying to figure out where this angle, where it lies. So this statement, secant, what does secant go with? With what? Cosine. Okay, secant and cosine. It says are greater than 0. So the first 2 that we have to eliminate are where secant and cosine are not positive. So I look at it and I say, okay, where are secant and cosine positive? I know they're both positive in the first quadrant because everything else is. And where else are they both positive? In the fourth quadrant, the last one. So I know I can cross off these 2. You see that, Allie? Yeah. And now I say, okay, let me move on to the second piece of information that they gave me because now this will help me narrow down the absolute last one. This should be CSC. So cosecant goes with what? Sine? Okay, so yes, ma'am. Question was, how do you know if it's positive or negative? If the statement says it's greater than 0, then it's positive. If it says less than 0, then it's negative. So the second statement says sine and cosecant are negative. I know that we're talking about negative because it's less than 0. So with the two that are left over, where are sine and cosecant negative? What's the only thing that's positive in the fourth quadrant? What's the only thing positive in the fourth quadrant? Cosine and secant. In the first quadrant, everything is positive, right? So can sine and cosecant be positive in the first quadrant? No. I mean negative, I'm sorry. So where does this angle lie? In quadrant 4. We will practice this more, I promise. The more you guys see it, the more we look at it, the more you talk about it, the easier it gets, I promise. But those questions, you have to look at the first piece of information, kind of decipher, narrow it down, cross off 2 of the 4 quadrants. Then you look at the second piece of information, and you can narrow it down. Yes, ma'am? All right, we're going to go through here real quick, and then we're going to be done for today. This is the type question that you will see on your web assigned PDF, and you'll also see it on your quiz. Determine the 6 trig functions given this information. Do you guys have a picture? No. So there's a lot of thinking that's involved here. First of all, when I say tangent, what is the ratio of tangent? Y over x, y over r, x over r. What are they telling me when they tell me the tangent is negative 5 over 3? What's tangent? What over what? Y over x. Perfect. So I told you the first thing you're going to need to do is identify your x, your y, and your r. That's easy to do mathematically. You guys know right now that your y is 5 and your x is 3, right? Do you know which one of those is negative? No, because that negative sign is just out in front. We don't know which one is negative. You know what will tell you that? This second piece of information here. They tell you that theta lies in, what quadrant are they telling me that theta is in? The fourth. What do you know about the signs of x and y in the fourth quarter? X is positive and y is what? Negative, right? Now, if you miss that little negative sign, are your trig functions going to be all correct? No. This is the hardest part of this lesson, is this little tiny minor detail. The rest of it, you guys are fine. How do I find r? Well, I know that I would take 3 squared plus negative 5 squared, and that's going to give me r squared. So 3 squared is 9, right? Negative 5 squared is 25 equals r squared. What's 9 plus 25? 34. And then, so my r is the square root of 34. If I could break it down, I would, but I can't. So now if we have to find all 6 trig functions, you guys can do that no problem. Let's write it out. Sine of theta. What is the ratio for sine of theta? Yes, it's opposite over hypotenuse, but I don't have a triangle. So what is sine with our x, y, and r? Y over r. Okay, so cosine of theta is what? X over r, correct? Tangent is? Well, hold on, y over x. We'll just write out, I get what you're saying, but let's just write out the ratios. So then my cosecant, if sine is y over r, cosecant is r over y, right? If cosine is x over r, then secant is r over x. Tangent is y over x. That means cotangent is x over y. Now, the rest of this is real easy. You just take this information and throw it into your ratios. Sine would be y, which is negative 5, over the square root of 34. Can I leave it like that? Nope, we have to rationalize, right? So it's the square root of 30, it's negative 5 root 34 over 34. So if sine is y over r, what's cosecant? R over y. So the square root of 34 over negative 5. You could put the negative anywhere. You could put it in front of front of root 34. You could put it in front of the 5, or just put it in front of the fraction sign. It doesn't matter. So now we look at cosine. Cosine is x over r. So it's 3 over square root 34. Can I leave square root 34? No, I couldn't leave it in the first one. I can't leave it in the second one. So it's 3 root 34 over 34. So then my secant is going to be r over x. So the square root of 34 over 3. Good. And then tangent, y over x, so negative 5 over 3. So what's your cotangent going to be? Negative 3 over 5. Good. And the more you guys practice these, I promise you, the easier they get. This seems like, what? I promise it'll get easier. You just have to look at the information that they give you at the beginning and say, okay, how can I break this down? What are they telling me? What are they telling me? Like in the second example, first thing I would do is say, okay, they said secant of theta is negative 2. What's underneath that negative 2? A 1. Okay, this is over 1. So that's a value that they gave me. Now I'm going to say to myself, all right, secant. What does secant go with? Secant goes with what? Cosine, right? So remember, cosine is x over r, correct? So what are they giving me when they tell me the secant is negative 2 over 1? R, thank you, over x. Good job. So now I can say, all right, I know at least 2 of my values, so I can find all 3 of them. Now, guys, think about it. So you have a 1 and a 2. So r is 2, x is 1. Where does the negative sign go here? Because it's a whole number, so it's over 1. Where does the negative sign go?
Yeah, both of them in this quadrant 3.
Well, hold on. I like what you're thinking there. That's that. No, that's good thinking. But with my 1 and my 2, where does the negative sign go? You can tell. You can tell by looking right now.
Negative 2.
Not. It's,
No, it can't be both because
I know. I like what you're thinking with both. We'll get there in a second. But where does the negative sign go, with x or with r? What did I tell you guys? R always is. Always positive. That's our hypotenuse. So that negative sign has to go here. Has to be there. So we can find our y. We could say negative 1 squared plus y squared equals 2 squared. Yes, ma'am.
I'm confused because since it's secant, wouldn't it be flipped? Why wouldn't it be like x over?
It is flipped. Secant is r over x. Cosine is x over r. That's why I identified its parent trig function and then said, oh, okay, this is what's flipped. So when I work this out, I get 1 plus y squared equals 4, right? Subtract 1 from both sides. So y squared equals 3. So y is the square root of 3. Okay, y is the square root of 3. Now, you guys have to take into account this second piece of information. This is very important. Why is this very important? 2 of you already saw. Why is this really important? Where does this angle lie? In the third quadrant. What do you know about the x value and the y value in the third quadrant? They're both negative. So there needs to be a negative sign in front of that y. It's like a little puzzle. You guys are going to have to take your time when you go through this. The math behind it of putting the square root of 3 over 2 or whatever, that's not a big deal. But there's a huge difference between positive square root of 3 over 2 and negative square root of 3 over 2. So now we can find our 6 trig functions. We have sine of theta, y over r.
Wait, why is it negative square root of 3?
Because it's in the third quadrant, and in the third quadrant, both signs are negative. All right, so sine of theta is y over r. That means my cosecant of theta is what over what?
X over Y. Oh, R over Y.
Cosecant's r over y. It's flipped. I tricked you on that one. So cosine theta is x over r. So secant theta is r over x. Good. Tangent theta is y over x. So cotangent of theta is x over y. And now we just plug our information in. Y over r. So I have negative square root of 3 over 2. Do I have to do anything with that? Nope. So when I come over here and I flip it, I have negative 2 over square root of 3. Is that all right? No. What do I have to do? Rationalize. So I have negative 2 root 3 over 3. Cosine is x over r. Negative 1 over 2. Do I have to do anything to that? No. Secant is Negative 2 over 1. Do I have to do anything to that? No. Tangent is y over what? X. So negative root 3 over negative 1. What does that equal? Square root of 3 over 1, or just square root of 3. Good. And then my cotangent is going to be x over y. So negative 1 over negative square root of 3. What's wrong with that? Rationalize. 2 negatives become a positive. So it's the square root of 3 over 3. Now again, I understand this is a lot of information. We're going to practice this again on Tuesday.
Wouldn't it be negative square root of 3?
Thank you, sir. A negative divided by a negative is a what? Right? Yep. But you have to, the biggest thing is to just look at the information that they give you from the very beginning and just decipher everything. Don't try and rush through this because it's not going to work out well. You need to really take your time and figure out what they're talking about, what they're asking. And then the math part behind it, the computation is not that bad. Sound good?